There is no doubt that domestic resource mobilization has attracted a lot of attention in many developing countries in recent times. This is not surprising in the face of unabating debt burden, dwindling revenues from oil proceeds, coupled with domestic and external financial imbalances confronting these developing nations. You see, nations are compelled to adopt stabilization and adjustment policies which demand better and more efficient methods of mobilizing domestic financial resources with a view to achieving financial stability and promoting economic growth. One way to achieving this economic growth is through effective and efficient tax system. How effective and efficient is our tax system in Nigeria? Good morning and welcome to Economic Searchlight. I'm Seun Akinola. This is Splash FM 1055. On Economic Searchlight this week, we shall take a look at tax administration in Nigeria as a viable way of generating domestic resources for national development. Once again, welcome to Economic Searchlight. Taxation plays a crucial role in promoting economic activities and growth. Through taxation, government ensures that resources are channeled towards important projects in the society while giving succor to the weak. Unfortunately, in today's Nigeria, the economic development is nothing to write home about. As it stands, the revenue mix for Nigeria is from crude oil proceeds and mainly from borrowing. Taxation is just being introduced into the mix properly. It therefore means that tax is crucial to revenue generation of any nation. But the role of taxation in promoting economic activities and growth has not been felt, primarily because of its poor administration. The economy has remained in a deep slumber. All macroeconomic indicators have shown an economy that is in dire need of rejuvenation, reflation, and indeed radical reform. In the light of this, tax administration needs to be revamped, while refunds of taxes as well as duty drawbacks administration are somewhat inefficient. A critical challenge before tax administration in the 21st century Nigeria is to advance the frontiers of professionalism, accountability, and awareness of the public on the imperatives and benefits of taxation in our personal and business lives, as well as guarantee improved revenue base for the country. The Minister of Finance, Mrs. Kemi Adeosun, spoke recently on how this government is working hard to change the revenue mix of the nation and equally reform the tax administration with the focus of moving the tax to GDP ratio from 6% that it is now to 10% and then to 15%. Kemi Adeosun.
The traditional revenue mix in Nigeria has been two things: oil and borrowings. This government's come in and said, no, we're going to change that mix. It's going to be oil, tax, borrowings. Now, to tax people or to get our tax revenues up takes time. Our tax to GDP ratio is 6%. Just to give you context, Ghana's at about 17, South Africa's about 25, most advanced countries 30 and above. We're at 6. In fact, at the World Bank Spring meetings, it was interesting. Some of the other ministers of finance were laughing at us in Nigeria, saying, look, the only people who are worse than you are Saudi Arabia. And it was ironic because, you know, Saudi Arabia have 10 million barrels of oil a day and only 30 million people. We only have 2 million barrels of oil a day and 180 million people. We don't have any business being in the same group as Saudi Arabia. So this administration has really set up to ensure that we reform our tax collection. The voluntary asset and income declaration scheme is on. That's our tax amnesty program. It's doing very well. It's been very well received. We've already started to get submissions from both individuals and companies who haven't been paying the right taxes. And if we can move our tax to GDP ratio up, which we need to do, from 6, we set an initial target of 10, but ultimately we need to be at 15, 16. It will transform this economy because it will suddenly provide the type of funding for the type of services that this population that we have needs. So we haven't abandoned the tax drive. In fact, if anything, it's really been intensified. The only thing was, during the recession, you can't be flogging people to pay tax when their income has gone. But as we return to growth, we're saying to Nigeria, as you grow, as your income comes, you've got to do the right thing and pay your taxes, both to state government and to federal government.
And that was the Minister of Finance, Mrs. Kemi Adeosun, speaking on government's efforts at increasing the revenue base of Nigeria. Now, since our attention is now drawn to taxation as a major source of revenue for any government, the onus lies on government to do the needful. Taxation is recognized globally as a very important tool for national development and growth. One of the major indices by which development and growth can be measured in any viable society is the amount of wealth which is being created by economic activities undertaken in such a society. When the people are not involved in meaningful employment, how can they earn income, and how else can they contribute taxes to the government as part of their contribution to national development? Well, my engagement with Yomi Olugbenro is revealing, particularly on the subject matter of tax administration in Nigeria, its prospects and challenges. Yomi Olugbenro, my guest on the program today, is a partner and the West Africa tax leader at Deloitte, Nigeria. He's an accomplished tax consultant, a fellow of ICANN and Chartered Institute of Taxation in Nigeria, CITN. We spoke extensively on how Nigeria can achieve effective and efficient tax administration. Yomi Olugbenro, welcome to the program.
Thank you so very much for having me.
How are you?
I'm very good. It's good to be on your show.
Good to have you at last.
Thank you.
Right. We want to talk about assessment of tax administration in Nigeria. Also look at how we can achieve an efficient and effective tax system in Nigeria. Recently, the Minister for Finance, Ms. Kemi Adeosun, disclosed that just 214 people pay more than 20 million naira in annual taxes. And she said of these 214 people, only one is outside of Lagos. The rest reside in Lagos. Now, my concern here is this. The nation is pushing toward non-oil revenue.
That's right.
Why do you think we are pushing towards this?
All right. I think the statistics you mentioned earlier is one of the numbers that, just get you marveling around about the system of compliance and the level of compliance in the country. And that's probably why this sudden wake, is getting everybody by surprise, if you like. I think we've been forced to go back to what we should have been doing, ordinarily. But I think the fact that the nation is oil producing, as we would like to call ourselves, for a number of years, and those period of boom, we tend to have forgotten the right thing to do. So the collapse of oil and the shortage of the acute shortage in oil revenue that the nation suffered forced everybody to come back to what we should be doing ab initio. So the era of the oil boom seems to be over now. We're having some bit of relative stability, but it's no longer at the level that it used to be when oil peaked at about $110 to the barrel. Now, maybe much lower than half of that, even at this current state. So that's the state of the economy. The infrastructure gap is mind-boggling. We need a lot of money to be able to not only just get our way out of recession, but to be able to have on a sustainable basis the amount of revenue that we need to build this nation. And we just don't have enough at all if we must tell truth to ourselves.
Now, somewhat also, if you look at some of the statistics that you just said, that just one of what will also make us feel bad about our nation. I also read that it's the tax to GDP, tax contribution to GDP is about 6%, one of the lowest in the world, as it were. Why should we have such a huge amount of workforce and then we have such a low revenue-generating input through taxation?
Let me worsen it for you by giving you maybe one or two additional statistics to actually describe the level of compliance. So you've mentioned tax to GDP ratio, which is at the world lowest of around 6%. And next door neighbor Ghana, many of the African countries, even world top countries in Africa are doing far more than that. The average around us here is something in the neighborhood of 15 to 20%, and we're doing just 6%. That's one. You had mentioned one of the statistics, which is the number of people paying taxes in excess of 20 million, just 214. If you lower that, or probably half that, to the number of people paying taxes up to 10 million in a year, you still have less than 1,000, just about 914. Move that a little further. There are about maybe roughly 70 million people that are engaged in productive activity or so in the country. The total number of registered taxpayers in the country is around 14 million.
Less than 15 million.
Less than 15 out of a total of 70. So that literally means 4 out of every potential 5 taxpayer are currently outside of the net. And wait for this. Out of the 14 million, about 96% are those that are taxed by way of PAYE scheme. So just about 4% of those who are self-employed and all of those VIPs, high net worth individuals in the entire country is what we have. So that's where we are.
So we can probably safely say that we do not have tax culture, really.
We don't have tax culture, and a number of reasons why that is so. You can talk about education, for example. We need to get the information right across to everybody from our school system. We need to. You could count on your fingertips the number of institutions in Nigeria where taxation is offered. Not just as a full-time course, but just one of the courses that could be taken by those who are doing economics or accounting or law. So we need to have we need to have our educational system revised to recognize this importance. That's one. The second is we need a lot more accountability and transparency. The reality is that when people actually feel a judicious, utilization of their money, the willingness to comply, it's enhanced, it's increased. It's stimulated. We're not there. Where you seated right here, Seun, if you get on Google and you try to get information about the number of the revenue statistics of what South African Revenue Service is making, or the HRMC in the UK, or Ghana Revenue Service, or just about any other tax authority, KRA in Kenya, you're likely going to come up with information as recent as maybe 2016 or maybe early this year. You're going to have information. The last statistics that we have of the country posted by the FRS on its official portal is that of the first quarter of 2016. The information needs to be a lot more available. So that's two. So we need to be a lot more accountable. We need to be a lot more transparent. We need a lot more of our leaders to show good examples. So during electioneering, during campaigning, we need to have a lot more of information, a lot more of disclosure of how our leaders are leading by examples and showing that it really pays to pay tax. That's probably the third one. But more importantly is the need for simplification. I think the process and the whole system of paying taxes in the country is just too complicated. We need to simplify the process. And I can give you an example, Seun, just to buttress this. The World Bank, in its annual Ease of Doing Business reports, rated Nigeria. These are statistics that are often quoted. We're not doing well at all. But I'm more concerned about the element of ease of paying taxes. Okay. In 190 out of 190 countries, Nigeria is sitting in the bottom 9. We rank 182 in terms of how easy it is to pay tax. We spend over 900 hours every year trying to comply, paying about 59 different taxes in a year, all of which are probably manual based. Compare that to South Africa, I think it's ranked about 59, spend just a little above 200 hours in a year, paying just 7 taxes. So we need to simplify the process. We need to deploy technology holistically. A lot of efforts are going on, I must admit, by the Presidential Enabling Business Council on ease of doing PEBEC, on ease of doing business, and they are focusing on ease of paying taxes. There are a lot of reforms going on by FRS, but it's still scratching the surface. We need to we need a complete revamp of the entire process so that it is simplified, people are aware, the information is available, and then you can go ahead to go with all of the federal might or all of the government might to go in search of those who are not compliant.
The program is Economic Searchlight on Splash 105.5 FM, and my guest is still Yomi Olugbenro, a partner at Deloitte, Nigeria. When we come back after this break, we'll talk more about the 3 principles of tax administration in Nigeria. Nigeria will need to automate the processes of taxation, build capacity by tax authorities, and also ensure effective collaboration among government agencies responsible for revenue generation. We'll be back. You're welcome back. The program is still Economic Searchlight on Splash 105.5 FM, and we're still examining tax administration in Nigeria, prospects, and even challenges. Effective collaboration amongst government agencies, automation of processes, and capacity building by tax authorities have always been identified by stakeholders as strategies for achieving an efficient and effective tax system in Nigeria. Yomi Olugbenro shed more light on these issues. While I was looking at the assessment of tax administration in Nigeria document, it mentioned 3 things. I guess it even came out of Deloitte: automation of processes, capacity building by tax authorities, effective collaboration among government agencies. You've explained to me the automation of processes in the sense that it could make it easy for those who want to pay taxes to actually do it. Now, but I'm concerned about that. 1. 2 is I'm concerned about the capacity building by tax authorities in the sense that how easy is it for Nigeria, for instance, to be able to collect taxes from those who should pay? Let me give you an example. I know Vades will take a look at it. An example is, do we have data to know how many people are outside of the tax net and how we can bring them into the tax net? Do you think, for instance, FIRS has the capacity to cover Nigeria? We have over, like you said, over 14 million workforce, which is documented. I'm sure many more are there that are not documented. How about capacity of the tax authorities, both the federal and the state?
Well, I will come back to the issue of capacity, and we probably can talk about the third one, which is collaboration. But you touch on something that is very touchy to my mind, which is the issue of the availability of data. I think we should have the information that we need to determine who is on the net and who is not on the net. It is shameful if, as a country, we claim we can identify those who are compliant or those who are not compliant. How about all of these fragmented databases that you have, replicated all over the country? You have BVN information. BVN has credible linkages to individual, including biometrics. So these are not information that can be faulted. You have information with NCC. You have it with those who have national passport. You have different databases of those who are registered with CAC, of those who just about anything. Even the NCC, even the telephone, GSM, biometrics information that we're taking. These are massive amount of information that sits in different pockets. You have national ID card, all biometrics enabled. You have national passport, biometrics enabled. You have GSM, biometric enabled.
Driver's license.
Driver license. All. Why can't we integrate all of these databases together and be able to sieve out those who are within the net and those who are outside of the net? And we just need to deploy technology, which kind of tie into the issue of capacity. Because if we continue to go on this manual basis, the ability of the field tax authority having just a few headcount on their payroll to go in chase of 70 million people, we're not going to be able to move anywhere. But this is the age of technology. This is the age of technology. Just with you alone, sitting behind a laptop, behind a machine, you have massive amount of information and access to just about everybody in the country. And government should be able to sit up. Government should understand that the exigencies of times require that we're a lot more proactive, you show a lot more seriousness, and be able to put our money where our mouth is.
Now, let's look at you talked about the capacity now. What about effective collaboration among government agencies? How should they relate with each other? You touch on it for me by saying that we have NIMC, we have NCC, we have BVN, we have, different other data everywhere, different agencies doing all of these things. How can we put them together, for instance, in such a way that it will be effective for us, it will be efficient, and then no one will voluntarily escape paying taxes?
It's the right thing to do, and sometimes you're surprised if at this day and time we're not actually thinking in that line. Many of the countries that we talk about have got very high level of compliance. It's not because the citizens are from the moon. They're not from another planet. Nigerians are spread all over the world, and in those countries they can't dare not pay taxes. Why? Because they know that they are visible to the government. They can't hide their income because the agency that is involved or the agency that is in charge of immigration is in talk with the agency at the customs and at the port as is in talk with the tax authority. In fact, in many countries, what you do have is both the custom and the tax authorities are all together. If an expert or if a visitor scans his passport at the point of entry and get into a particular country, that information is automatically shared with all of the agencies that should have something to do with visitors. And if you stay one day into becoming liable to tax, you're probably going to receive a debit note or a love note or a love letter from an agency of government, and you wonder where this information is coming from. That's exactly what I think the government needs to do. Today, we still have a separate tax agency, different from customs. And do you know what's very common? Somebody is bringing in some shipment or some goods, and for the purposes of making sure that the duty is as low as possible, reduce the value of goods for purposes of customs, and pay just about nothing in customs duty. Short-changing government. And as soon as that same individual brings the invoice back to business, he suddenly realizes that the true value needs to be disclosed for tax purposes so that his profit can be reduced and a lower amount of tax is payable. Why is that possible if agencies are talking to each other? Why can't we have a seamless process for tax registration that is now being thought of, between CAC to FRS to the reports that are being rendered by banks, for individual. If you walk into any banks today, you're going to see boldly pasted transaction exceeding certain amount is to be reported to the National Intelligence Agency. So what are we using that information for? Why are those same set of people still able to escape paying the amount of taxes? So I think government needs to rethink the entire process. This idea of segmented, compartmentalized system of using computer. But that's exactly what is being done. For me, that's not computerization. If you're using technology, each of the government parastatals and agencies should interact, speak to each other, so that we can just close the gap at those who just want to run away. Okay,
I'm still with Yomi Olugbenro right here on the program Economic Searchlight on Splash 105.5 FM. We're talking about tax administration in Nigeria. He's been able to give me more light on automation of processes, capacity building and by tax authorities, and effective collaboration among government agencies. Now, how can we achieve an efficient, effective tax system is a bit of the focus, and we've highlighted these issues. Achieving efficient and effective tax system will involve all of this. But there's one thing that I want you to also take a look at: tax gap. What is tax gap really?
All right, so let's go back to your intro to that question. So you did spoke about having an efficient tax system. I think it's critical and very important to understand that tax sits on a tripod. All right, so there is the policy, all right, tax policy, there is the law, and also there is the administration of taxes. Each of those tripods needs to be fixed appropriately for us to be able to have a working system of taxation in the country. And I must say that the first leg seems to have been appropriately handled.
The policy.
The policy. Government came up with a revised national tax policy. I think it was approved on the 1st of February or thereabout by the Federal Executive Council. It wasn't actually the first attempt at tax policy. It was first put in place in 2012 by the last administration, but was largely unimplemented and not as concise as this recent one. So, and it contains some very critical provision as to what our direction should be. It talks about how we could use taxation as a way of rejuvenating the economy, how we could redirect incentives, how we could make tax education and tax awareness a lot more, how we could focus a lot more on indirect taxation that is cheaper to collect and easier to run away from, and very critical provisions that are in there. The second block, it's where I think significant headaches still exist, and that is with our laws. The regulations, the laws that governs the system of tax in the country as we speak is outdated, to put it very mildly. The earliest, the newest, right, the most recent of our income tax legislation is a 1993 Act, the Personal Income Tax Act. That was before we have internet in the country. So let alone talk about e-commerce and all of those. 1993. Our value, we have
not reviewed that.
It's largely been unreviewed. We've had some very skeletal changes thereafter, but it's still an outdated law by every standard.
And that's what we still run by.
That's what we still run by. Our Companies Income Tax Act is a 1979 Act. It's only undergone some skeletal review or changes. If some languages and wording that were used in there, many of our children in secondary school today will probably be looking for the appropriate dictionary, to be able to explain. So they're outdated, and that's what we bequeathed to the tax administrators. So sometimes I pity the situation that these individuals, the tax administrators, are confronted with, because they are not the lawmaker.
Let me pause you there.
Yeah.
That brought something to my mind now. So it means that if I run my business online and I'm making millions of naira online, it will be difficult for tax authorities to take me to anywhere for taxation. I don't have an office.
Probably in a number of cases. But sometimes also, rather than allow the individual to go, if the revenue authority become visible to that transaction, they're likely going to apply some very archaic rule. So they're going to apply the brick and mortar rule in taxing a business that is now e-commerce. So the only challenge that I think exists is their capability to actually trace those individuals. So when they trace, or if they eventually, find out, if they can, they begin to apply some rules that are not modern. Right. Just to put it very mildly. So the entire law actually require a significant review. And the amount of time that is required to pass amendment or to make new laws, it's not demonstrating the urgency of time. I think we were in a crisis situation, and I thought the recession that we went through in 2016 up until perhaps the second quarter of 2017 should have woken everybody up. This will have provided an opportune time for the country to look at the entire law and come up with new set of regulations, new set of legislation that will enhance the capability of the tax administrators to be able to be a lot more effective in cracking down.
Now you're moving to administration now.
Yes. So administration essentially, it's what the various tax authorities are doing, and within that also are significant bottlenecks. The country is a federal structure, as you understand, and the taxing power is also shared along those lines. That's actually what explains the reason why people talk about multiplicity of taxes, because there are taxes that are collectible and administered by the federal agency, and those that are collectible by state. In fact, the list of approved taxes acts that we have in the country have close to about 60 different taxes and levies. 9 at the federal level, about 25 at the state level, and some levies and charges numbering about 21 at the state level. But it's understandable for when people say, well, not all of these are taxes. I agree, because some of them are just charges and levies and all of that. The key tax laws are essentially the Income Tax Act for both, for Companies Income Tax Act, the Personal Income Tax Act, the Capital Gains Tax Act, the Petroleum Profit Tax Act, the Value Added Tax Act, and the Personal Income Tax Act. The others are a bit sectoral, like maybe the Education Tax Act and the Information Technology Levy Act. All right. So outside of those, the rest are more of charges and levies. But that's not the point. The reality is that for as long as you have charges and levies that create compliance burden on businesses and individuals, they need to comply with them, and that's why we talk about the system that is just overburdensome on the people. So we need to also revise how this is done, right? So can't we simplify the whole of the process? Why must a state government be eligible to collect over 20 different taxes and levies? Can't that be simplified into 2, 3, or 4? We have no business having more than just about 7 in the entire country, but we have about 60. So that creates a lot of bottlenecks. And what happens?
And it lowers the efficiency.
Absolutely. So the guys go in search, of those who are already within the net, because that's just about all they have time to chase. So those who are not within the net are, roaming the streets. Nobody is able to pin down on them. And if you come voluntarily to disclose, or you're already within the net, you just get overburdened, by incessant visits and reviews that you have by the tax authorities.
So we can rightly say that if this tripod that you mentioned are not taken care of, we'll certainly have that tax gap that we're talking about.
Absolutely. So because the gap we're talking about is the untapped potential that we have within our tax revenue space, and you don't need to be too techie. You don't need to be a tax professional to understand that a 6% tax to GDP, when the average that is recommended for a developing country will be in the neighborhood of 20%. The government with the new PEBEC initiatives is trying to aim 10% in the immediate, 15% by 2020, and thinking maybe we can progressively raise that. But that's still a gap. Even if we achieve 15% today, which will probably take several years, several consistent efforts to do, will still not be optimal.
So we'll still not be running competitively. In any case,
correct.
I am concerned about that gap. And today, states are largely, insolvent. Today, people will say that some of our states are not economically viable.
Correct.
Whereas they could be if they look inward very well. I'd like you to look at how we can help. The federal tax authorities appear to have woken up, as you said, and they're making a lot of significant efforts to develop the system. But if you come down to the state level, the situation may not be as it is at the federal level. What can the state do, in such a way that the IGR will be shored up? That the IGR will be shored up in such a way that they can be looking at targets like Lagos sometime in the future, but at least they can wake up. State government are owing salaries because they're not making money, whereas there are many people roaming their streets who should be paying taxes.
Right. So if there are many agencies and some private individuals that are beginning to dig into the state of state, for example, and try to do some bit of how viable are these states, and the results across many of those reports are very appalling. You probably can't count beyond 4 or 5 of states that can barely survive outside of the federal allocation. And I think states need to wake up to that reality, because they have no business being in such condition. They have no business being in such condition. The number of individuals paying taxes that the Minister of Finance spoke about said about 214, and just about 2 outside of Lagos. Well, I've had conversation with a sitting governor in a neighboring state that actually kind of challenged that. They've been able to identify maybe about in that particular instance probably up to 9 or so individuals that should have been classified as falling within that state. But that's just trying to where do we do the classification? The truth still is just about 214. So maybe 190 of those are in Lagos.
I am sure that state will be very close to Lagos.
It's quite close. It's quite close to Lagos. So and I think it's actually been in print. I've had the Ogun State governor. It's actually the one I'm referring to. So I read it in the paper. So it's a public information.
Yes,
so that probably a few more states and it's understandable. So people that are residing on the borderline that probably should have been a part of Ogun State are probably counted as
still 214.
But it's still 214. So we're still far from what we should do. So I think it's time for the state government across the country to actually sit up on how to improve IGR. The clamor for how we allocate what is available at the central should subside, and individual state government should look within. There are opportunities that exist. I mean, I just mentioned to you there are about 25 different taxes and levies that state government, you don't need to create new laws. You just need to become a lot more efficient in tracking and in monitoring. The tax legislations, particularly Personal Income Tax Act and Companies Income Tax Act, has already armed the state government with a capacity to be able to assess information that's available with banks and with other agencies, and they just need to have some bit of a seriousness around how this information are looked into. And I don't see any reason why people living within the borders of a particular state are living in there tax free. It's not done. It's not done. They should be able to come up with measures that will help to enumerate, houses and properties and businesses and individual, and be able to show seriousness in tackling non-compliance. It's doable. I think Lagos State has shown some significant example. It's not where it should be, but I think the example of Lagos and maybe one or two other states that are waking up had provided very serious hope that if you do the right thing, provide capacity for the internal revenue services in your state, do sufficient training, do sufficient capacity building. If you need to use services and expertise of people who are in the private sector to help do this, I think it's worth all of the efforts. And you will see in matter of years that the IGR of state could move from those paltry sums to a significant amount that can actually help to defray the cost of governance.
Now, I was speaking with one professor some time ago, and he said that he had a house in Lagos and he had another one in another state in Nigeria, and he said he knows how much he pays on that house in Lagos, but the other one where he had the house, I mean, he's not paying anything. Not paying anything because the system is not requiring anything from him.
Absolutely so, and you will be surprised that the state where he's paying something doesn't have a different tax law from the one where to the one where he's not paying. Our Personal Income Tax Act is the same single legislation for the entire country. It's the same law that is being administered. Lagos doesn't have a separate Personal Income Tax Act from Ogun State or from Rivers or from Kaduna or from Kano. The same Personal Income Tax Act, and it is just the efficiency and effectiveness of administration at the various levels that creates the different gaps that you're having.
All right, thank you for making those clarifications for me. And so every state should look at the way to enumerate their properties, enumerate their people, and be able to put them in the tax net. Thank you for that clarification. Economic Searchlight will be back in a moment. Don't go away. Welcome back. It feels good to know that you're still there with us on Economic Searchlight here on Splash 105.5 FM. Now on the home run. We started with the compliance level and how poor it has been. Taiwo Udili is the head of Tax Corporate Advisory Services at PricewaterhouseCoopers Nigeria. He spoke on tax compliance level in Nigeria and also the way forward. Taiwo Udili.
In terms of compliance, Nigeria is not doing well at all. In fact, we're performing worse than war-torn countries like Afghanistan, like even Iraq, as well as talking about even countries like even Syria is having almost 11% as to GDP ratio. Nigeria has 6. So our compliance rate is one of the lowest in the world. According to the Joint Tax Board, there are about 10 million people, individuals, registered with all the tax authorities in Nigeria. Our population is 180 million. If you look at the National Bureau of Statistics, we have 77 million working population. So you imagine 77 million and only 10 million are registered for tax. Out of that, 4.5 million are in Lagos. So all the other states have only 5.5 million. How come people are not, this is not even asking them to pay tax, to even register first, they are not registered. You look at value-added tax, according to the Finance Minister and the Federal Revenue Service, compliance rate is 12%, which means you have 88% of businesses that are supposed to be registered for and charging VAT are not even registered. Now, this means that overall, our tax compliance rate is very low. It's very low, and therefore, the revenue we generate from tax is not enough to provide development. There was a recent IMF report that says that all over the world, when your tax to GDP ratio gets to about 15% or more, the development will accelerate. So the reason why Nigerians have to pay tax and to hold government accountable to use the tax money for the benefit of the people, it's not just about raising money. It's also because we need that for our economic development, which is what would provide the quality of life, will provide employment, will provide social welfare that people are craving for in Nigeria. The way forward is, first we need to start from the very top. So the tone from the top has to be on point. So people who want to be political leaders, the president, the vice president, governors, deputy governors, lawmakers, ministers, commissioners, must start by paying the right amount of tax and paying it on time. So we heard about this state, I think it was Abia State, where they said someone did not declare the amount of tax correctly, did not pay on time, and all of that. But when I look at it, I was like, well, this is more political than tax itself. Under normal circumstances, not paying your taxes on time and correctly is more than enough to disqualify you from holding a public office. Many of the politicians, when they want to do their screening to contest, is when they go and pay tax, and they just pay as little as 50,000. Just get a document that has tax clearance certificate on top of it, even though the car you drove there is a bulletproof car worth 50 million naira. You just paid 50,000 and you're cleared. You then get into a position of authority to oversee taxpayers' money, even though you yourself haven't been paying taxes. It's not difficult to understand why we are where we are, because most of our leaders are themselves not compliant with tax matters, and therefore they're not paying attention to it. There's also the issue around policy. Policy has to be clear. And then lawmaking. All the tax laws we have are out of date. They're not fit for purpose. We have the Stamp Duty Act that was creating a lot of issues beginning of this year because CBN said banks should start collecting stamp duty. Do you know that law was a law of 1939? We have lawmakers, House of Rep, Senate, and most times we're debating things that they're not useful. When there are tax laws, we should be reviewing. So we have the value-added tax that was a decree of 1993. The world has evolved today. At the time that we enacted our VAT law, e-commerce was not an issue in the world. In fact, internet was just gaining ground. But today, the volume and the value of commerce on the internet is unbelievable. Our tax law is unable to address that. And we have lawmakers who don't think that it's a priority to look at those laws. You don't even have to be the one inventing it. A lot of countries have done it. Review what is being done elsewhere and localize it. So lawmaking is also a key issue. And finally is tax administration. The tax administration in Nigeria needs a lot of reform. In terms of capacity building, you find many of the state tax authorities and even FRS now are using consultants. There's no leading tax authority around the world that is using consultants to do tax audits. You build your own internal capacity. You can call on consultants to help you with training, with strategy, with KPI, with measurement, assessment, but not to be doing tax audit. It's not right. And you also have the use of technology is lacking. For many of them, just to process your tax clearance certificate, it's rocket science. You travel up and down and talk to tax officers and be in traffic for months just to receive that you've paid tax. Whereas in countries like Estonia, you can file your returns and get tax clearance certificates in less than 5 minutes because they're using technology for it. So we have the opportunity to leapfrog in Nigeria by learning from other countries, by letting go of things that really held us back in Nigeria, including loopholes in the law, archaic provisions, ambiguous provisions, and to be able to reform our tax system to be fit for purpose, such that it does not wag the business dog. It's a tail that should not wag the business dog. We should allow people to do their businesses legitimately, make money, but also demand that they pay tax. And in the process of paying tax, it should not be too complicated as it is at the moment.
Well, that's it on Economic Searchlight for this week. I hope you join us for another analytical edition next Friday at 11 a.m. on this dial, Splash FM 105.5. For comments and inquiries, you can reach me via SMS or WhatsApp on 081 124 94 231, 081 124 231. On Twitter at Seun Akinola, at Seun Akinola, S Akinola, at splashfm1055.com is my email address, sakinola at splashfm1055.com. I'm Seun Akinola. Bye for now.